Some say MMOs are dying. Others say MMOs are dead. I disagree with both. It's 2019, and MMOs are evolving. This is MultimediaJay Radio Style for Sunday, March 3rd, 2019. Let's start the show.
MultimediaJay Radio Style.
What is up, everybody? I'm experimenting with some new things for the Radio Style series, obviously, and we'll just see where it all goes from here. But I want to say a few words about the state of MMOs, because as you can guess from our picture today, to go along with this podcast, I've actually been getting back into MMOs after a bit of a hiatus, or a situation where I wasn't really into them as much as I could have been. Forza Horizon 4! But bad jokes aside, though, MMOs have been the subject of all kinds of speculation over the last couple of years as to whether the genre is dead or dying, and needless to say, I disagree with both. So I want to talk a bit about that, as well as what I've been up to recently that has made me come to this decision to have this sort of a discussion. So I've gotten back into Final Fantasy XIV, a game that I hear is doing well for itself these days, so I figured I'd see what all the hoopla is about. I've had this game since the original launch in 2010. And the version 1.0 that ran so horribly and was quite a disaster is actually the reason why Tuxedo ever existed. My Core 2 Duo system at the time couldn't handle the game, so I was like, well, it's a very hardware-intensive game, guess I gotta build a new computer. So I did, and then the new computer couldn't handle the game either. And I was like, oh man, I've been a Final Fantasy fan since the Super Nintendo days, when I played what is now known as 4 and 6 as 2 and 3 here in the US on the Super Nintendo. Played a little bit of the more recent games too, but I've always been curious what would happen if Final Fantasy ever became an MMO. And then I tried 11, and I never got out of the Republic of Bastok because the game was rather dated, because it was largely in the vein of EverQuest and the rest of them as well. It was kind of earlier in its design. I hear the game has been radically overhauled to make it a little bit more friendly to people that don't want to be in a group everywhere they go, so they can experience the story and the like. So I might check that out sometime later on, but for now, I've had Final Fantasy XIV sitting on my shelves collecting dust for the majority of the game's existence. So I figured let's at least start with the newer Final Fantasy MMO in terms of finally getting my money's worth with this game. Because I'll tell you, it's been the sort of game that I drop in on every so often. I played the original 1.0 for a bit, got bored, went and played something else. Came back for A Realm Reborn, played it a little, got bored, went away and played something else. Came back in 2017 and spent less time than I did during the original Realm Reborn run, got bored, went away, played something else, and now finally, in February 2019, aka about a month or so ago, I finally blew the dust off the game. Of course, I can't install it anymore because it's the 1.0 version, and that's been shut down. You'll get an error message, but figuratively, I blew the dust off the game and have finally been getting my money's worth with some of the quality of life improvements to the game that have taken place during Stormblood, as well as some of the announcements of what's coming up for Shadowbringers. As I've made up for lost time, so to speak, with Final Fantasy XIV, I've actually been seeing how people are saying nice things about this game. And in a day and age where World of Warcraft has its issues literally every other expansion, I have to remind myself nowadays and go out of my way to remind myself that I left World of Warcraft in 2016 for non-antagonistic reasons. So all the nonsense that's been going on in BFA and all the stuff that's gone on since then has nothing to do with why I left the game. I left the game for non-antagonistic reasons to go check out Elder Scrolls Online when the 1 Tamriel patch came out. It's definitely been a struggle to stay positive about this sort of thing, though, and remember that little detail with what's gone on since I've left, as well as what's been showing up in my feeds on YouTube and other sites with regards to World of Warcraft, because I show an interest in MMOs, so of course your average feed robot is going to send me World of Warcraft news that way. So, anyways, let's talk about Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy is pretty much a mixed bag right now, but I can see why it's becoming more popular, because the developers have made the decision to not copy WoW as was the go-to move for all kinds of developers across the spectrum during the days closer to World of Warcraft's heyday. So I have seen some of the design choices, like, for example, keeping the world relevant a lot more than what we see in today's WoW environments, and having expensive cheat items in the stores to advance the story if you want to buy them, but it not feeling like too much of a loss to go through the main quest and advance the story the regular way. Even if you're playing catch-up for literally years of not playing this game like I have, I definitely can say that especially when you get into Heavensward and you get past that stage where Final Fantasy was being rebuilt from the ground up so it could succeed at all, which is basically what A Realm Reborn was. The story is interesting in A Realm Reborn. It gets a lot more interesting in terms of its value as a story that keeps you hooked and gets you attached to the characters and all the stuff that Final Fantasy games are known for. That really picks up in Heavensward, and I'm at the beginning of Stormblood right now. But after all the playing catch-up that I've been doing, trying to get into current content, at least until Shadowbringers comes out, and I'm taking a break from that and just branching out and doing other stuff in the world as well. But knowing what I know about the decisions that Blizzard has made over the last several years as World of Warcraft has declined, it's a breath of fresh air to see that the developer team for Final Fantasy deliberately decided not to just go along with that because WoW at one point was the most successful MMO. And I think that's really what's going to progress the discussion about MMOs beyond people's heads being stuck in the era when World of Warcraft was the undisputed champion of the entire genre. Let's recap a little something that WoW fanboys are not going to like. World of Warcraft's been in decline for a decade. When did we have the 12 million subs? When did we have the game's peak? I happen to be in agreement with the people that say early Lich King was when things were at their peak before things started to decline. You start getting Trial of the Crusader and catch-up mechanics negating entire swaths of content, though, and that's when the progression started towards, or if you want to call it regression, go right ahead, towards the environment we have nowadays, where I believe World of Warcraft is going to go down in history as being a net negative for the genre. Because you have a gigantic world with all kinds of levels to play through, well, RPG levels anyways, but only the most current stuff actually matters. So people are pressured to just blow through, or in other words, not stop and smell the roses while playing through the game, because there's ways, you can buy a boost, you can do all kinds of other stuff, or even just the social element that the zones are going to be empty. You're not going to really see anybody else there, and you're going to know, I'm a new player playing through the story for the first time, and everybody else is raiding, or something like that, or at least it'll feel like that. But that's the issue that I've had with World of Warcraft over the years, is that they dug their own grave with this stuff. The world isn't really anything that matters anymore. It's only the most current set of zones, and you'll feel it too. And whatever these people can do to take a hint from their competition and get people out into more parts of the world and spread everybody out a lot more than just, the most current zones and the most current everything is the only thing that anybody cares about. The more that happens, the better the game's going to do, because this lesson has already been learned by Blizzard's competition in the last several years, sometimes in rather interesting ways, too. Take Star Wars: The Old Republic, for example. There's a game that was turning heads back when it went free-to-play, and the developers decided to take the game in such a wildly different direction from what people thought about with MMOs that the gaming journalists were like, what on earth are these people doing? I'm speaking, of course, of emphasizing the cinematic storytelling and basically making Star Wars: The Old Republic like playing through a Star Wars movie. Yeah, the combat was kind of dull and the MMO mechanics could be kind of bleh, but you would definitely have a lot of fun leveling every single character class in the game because of the cinematics and all the storytelling that took place. As you decided, do you want to be light side, do you want to be dark side, what do you want to do, the choices you want to make, and even just saving the cutscenes and watching them later. I mean, it's basically like a Star Wars cartoon movie, which lined up very well with when The Force Awakens first hit the scene, and I was like, hey, I'll check the game out now that it's free to play, and I like this. I think I'm going to buy a sub for a few months. But that's the thing that has happened since then, is they've kind of fallen into an episodic pattern with that game. Most of the time when I've played Star Wars, there's been an episodic thing where new content comes out, people buy a month or two subs, and they just cancel when they want to go play something else. But what do you mean? What's the point of having a game where you're just subscribing and canceling all the time? Well, you're not paying money when you don't want to play the game. It basically turns MMOs into a content delivery platform for, if you like something like Star Wars or Final Fantasy or insert IP here, You basically have episodic content related to an ongoing story in that game that you can opt into and opt out of whenever you want. But I got a good laugh when I was reading about the episodic stuff taking off in Star Wars, particularly with the expansion packs. And the gaming journalists were like, why are these people putting a Knights of the Old Republic style single-player experience inside of an MMO? Why not? I hate to be the bearer of bad news for people that think that MMO equals WOW, but WoW has been in decline for decades at this point. Peak of the game, early Lich King, 2008, 2009. It's now 2019. And as the subs have gradually declined over the years, the World of Warcraft series, if you want to call it that, has settled into this pattern where literally every other expansion draws the ire of the player base, whoever happens to still be playing that game. So you went from Lich King into Cataclysm. It has controversies about healers getting nerfed and how Dragon Soul went and things like that. Drew the ire of the player base, which was resolved by the middle of Mists of Pandaria, which was dissolved and people were mad again by the middle of Warlords of Draenor, which was resolved, and people were saying nice things about the game again by the middle of Legion, which has flipped completely the other way in Battle for Azeroth. And my question for the WoW players who are angry, and they like the game, but they can't stand the direction it's been going in, is when is enough for you? How many more times is this cycle going to have to repeat itself, and you're going to end up angry all over again before you finally put your foot down and say enough is enough? There's other games out there. I'm going to go check them out. And if they take a wildly different direction from this game, hey, this one made me mad, so I'm going to go see what the other folks are doing because I'm sick and tired of all of this. That's worth a discussion on its own. It's going to be a discussion. I have plans to discuss that under the World of Whatcraft thing that I say when I joke about being out of the game for long periods of time, like where I am right now, which is the longest hiatus from WoW ever. Even my break in Mists of Pandaria didn't extend into the years, into years like this one has. And I'm not saying this as this grandiose speech before resubbing to the game like a hypocrite, because I'm not interested in playing BFA. I don't have the expansion. It's the first expansion that I haven't even bought yet. Even in a digital format, I don't have BFA, and I have no interest in playing it because there's other stuff that I'm way more interested in. I'm far more interested in the direction that Elder Scrolls Online is going, that Guild Wars 2 is going, and that Final Fantasy XIV is going, and even that Star Wars The Old Republic can go. That I could just round robin between these MMOs, canceling and subbing to whatever I want to play at the time, and essentially paying for content episodically, unless it has something like ESO, where you get free crowns every month for the so-called subscription fee. So the months that you're not playing, you're basically saving up for more player housing or something along those lines, or stuff from the cash shop, which you can get from your stipend, which has been increased recently, by the way. Plus, the never-ending craft bag is pretty awesome in ESO. But it's just the competition has evolved, and I really would consider going back to WoW to be a step backwards, especially with the mommy knows best finger-wagging attitude that the developers have had at, again, nothing new with Blizzard. So, and that I've heard all of this wailing and gnashing of teeth about. All these commentators saying all these terrible things about Activision Blizzard and how they're upset with the game and that they're hoping that insert patch here is going to finally fix BFA. And I say, I've been through this cycle of disappointment enough. But that's another discussion. We'll get to that at some point. Let's get back to talking about MMOs and Final Fantasy and the whole thing that people say, oh, MMOs are dying, MMOs are dead. It's not that the genre is dying or it's dead. The issue with MMOs is that the social interaction is supposed to be what defines them, but in recent years, it's kind of become more worth it to offer alternatives, even if it makes the game look like a single-player game. Like what happened with Star Wars. What the heck? Why is this wonderful story inside an MMO? Well, it's game content and it's Star Wars. So if you like playing video games and you like Star Wars, just subscribe, play through the story, and then cancel like players have been doing. You know, it's episodic content that you're essentially buying as you go. Same with Final Fantasy if you do the same thing. You play through the main quest, you play through Heavensward, you play through Stormblood, you play through until you finally run out of stuff to do, and the patches will bring out quests as well because the story keeps going. And you keep having reasons to come back and at least play through that. My question for people that guffaw at this stuff is, how different is paying a subscription fee for a couple of months and then stopping on an MMO to play content in an environment that you like, in a game that you like, versus just buying budget games every month, playing through them, and beating them. What's the difference? Besides the number of boxes you get to put on your shelf to look like a hardcore gamer with a lot of physical media. I mean, what exactly? I mean, what's the deal here? I mean, how many times? And I go all the way back to the Atari 7800/2600 and the NES here. How many times have you liked a game so much, you played through the story, you get to the end, and you're like, oh man, it's over now. I wish I could, see what happens to these characters next. And maybe there's a sequel or something like that, but it just seems like the MMO that you sub to once in a while to catch up on your story content with, that kind of could fill that niche, so to speak, instead of having to buy budget games every so often and just end up with a gigantic Steam library or something along those lines. I don't think it's that bad of an idea. But the interesting thing with Final Fantasy specifically is that Yoshi and the developers have hinted at perhaps evolving the game to where, with the trust system, you're not as held back if you're running old content as you would be right now. And that's what I've been running into. Because the story will take you through the dungeons in A Realm Reborn and Heavensward when that all comes up. And then you are subjected to the gate of MMO queues. Folks not wanting to tank. Folks not wanting to play healers, even though healers aren't wusses in Final Fantasy XIV. Check the numbers. Go ahead, find a target dummy. Try it out. You tell me that healers are wimps that can't do anything besides heal other people. Those days are long over, but that's another discussion. But yes, if you're leveling as anything other than a tank or a healer, you're going to be in the queue for like a half hour, maybe 20 minutes to half an hour, and it's like you're constantly getting stopped when you're trying to progress through the game, to the point where you might as well just pick a healer and level that. And then there's my current situation with Blue Mage. I'm curious about the Masked Carnival, which is where you're supposed to go with Blue Mage for, puzzling type encounters and trying to use your creature skills to down monsters and things along those lines. And, but I can't get to it because I'm gated by Aurum Vale. I am level 50 Blue Mage now, and I have to go and run Aurum Vale to pick up the Glower skill from the second boss. But my free company members don't want to run it. The people on the server don't want to run it. And in the data center's party finder, there is a grand total of one Blue Mage group that is rolling the dice on primals and not running Aurum Vale. So what am I supposed to do? It's a little too tough to solo. I could really squeak something out. But if I know there's other people that are leveling that'll want to run the dungeon. But you can't, of course, because of a limited job, you can't use the duty finder. So you have to have a pre-made group. So you have to find some other people to run the dungeon with. And that's where I've been getting stuck. So an entire section of the game that I'm technically paying for by having a sub is locked because of the interaction that isn't happening with other players. And this is why I support the evolution of MMOs to more resemble their offline counterparts. No matter what gaming journalists might say about, what the heck is Star Wars doing? Or, I don't understand Guild Wars 2. Or even if ESO draws the ire of some journalists out there. Or even what Final Fantasy becomes in Shadowbringers. The whole thing with MMOs being obsessed with themselves and the gimmick of having people running around everywhere that are all players, that's been a thing for 15 years, 20 years now. I mean, we can go back beyond World of Warcraft. We can go back to EverQuest. We can go back to Ultima Online and whatnot. I'm not going to go back as far as the MUDs or the multiplayer online dungeons in the text-based internet days. But in terms of MMOs, they're not a new thing. And this whole thing with MMOs being obsessed with each other and being able to coast on, we're an MMO, it just doesn't work. Eventually you gotta have, if it's an RPG, it's set in a game universe, you gotta have a story about stuff happening in that universe and find a way to make it work. Find a way so that people, if they play at off hours or they're in my situation, they have a very, very hard time finding people that want to run the specific content that they want to run. There's got to be some way to not get constantly stopped as you're paying for content that you can't get to because of some limitation somewhere in the game or even the community or even the genre itself. So this is probably something worth thinking about as MMOs continue to evolve. I mean, the heydays of World of Warcraft is over, and with that, the heydays of MMOs succeeding because they're MMOs. It's time for these games to evolve. They're going to become content delivery platforms at some point. Some of them already are. But I will not have a problem with an episodic future of the massively multiplayer online role-playing game, even if not all the content coming into these content platforms is traditional MMO style, bunch of people get together and do something type content. Because at the end of the day, I want to play some video games, not sit in a queue all night because nobody wants to run the stuff that I specifically have to do. Till next time, this is MultimediaJay signing off. Thanks for stopping by.